Hello class, today we are going to be learning all about lighting. We're going to start by doing a quick PowerPoint with some slides talking about some important vocabulary you need to know as we get started with lighting. We'll review some safety procedures. Then you guys are going to have an opportunity to research vocabulary as part of a word wall assignment. Finally, we will come back and we will watch another video where I explain the two types of lighting that you'll be using in this class, silhouette lighting and three-point lighting. So let's get started. Hello everyone, today we are going to begin a lesson on lighting. Today you should be taking notes as we learn all about the different styles of lighting we'll be using in this class, as well as different types of lights and lighting accessories. So please have something to write with so that we can get started. The first thing I want to talk to you about today are a couple vocabulary words that you need to know. The first is lamp. Anytime you hear me say the word lamp or we're talking about lamp in this class, we're talking about the bulb in the lighting unit. So if you hear lamp, I'm not talking about a desk lamp or the lamp that you have in your living room or beside your bed in your bedroom. This lamp refers to the actual bulb itself. The second word I want to talk about is lighting instrument. And when I say lighting instrument, I'm talking about the light fixture as a whole. So if I say lighting instrument, I'm talking about the head of the light, the lamp, the base, the stand, all of the instrument put together. So it's important that you know these two things before we start talking about lighting. And I want to take just a second to remind you guys about a couple of our lab safety rules in this class. Anytime we are using lights, we always have to remember that we can never touch the bulb. That's the lamp of the light. Anytime we touch a bulb with our bare hands, we are getting oils on that bulb, which can cause it to explode when it heats up the next time. So never touch the light bulb portion of a lighting instrument. Also, anytime you are using lighting instruments, it's important to be aware that they can get very hot very quickly. So anytime you're using lights, make sure that you are aware of how long they've been turned on, how long they've had to cool down before you touch them or try to move them in any way. Okay, next I want to talk about hard light. We're going to talk about two different types of light here, hard and soft. First, we'll focus on hard light. Hard light creates a sharp, distinct shadow. So for example, a spotlight would be an example of a hard light. When you think of hard light, I want you to think of a beam of light going in one direction that creates a distinct shadow for your subject. Hard light, an example would be a flashlight. A flashlight creates a solid beam of light. The same thing with a spotlight. If you were on stage in a theater production and the spotlight comes down, it is one direction and it creates a sharp, distinct shadow. So the big thing to remember here is the direction of the light. If it is one direction and it's contained, it is usually a hard light. Soft light is the opposite. Soft light creates an indistinct shadow. An example of a soft light would be a floodlight. Think about a football stadium. In a football stadium, they have floodlights. So when the sun goes down, the big floodlights come on, and light literally floods the entire area of the stadium. This is a diffuse light that doesn't have a specific direction, and it spreads over a wide area. Everybody take a look at the ceiling right now. The lights you see above you are soft lights. They are filling the entire room. They are not a single directional beam. That would be a hard light. Instead, the lights you see on the ceiling of our classroom are soft lights. They fill the entire area, going out in different directions as the light spreads and diffuses. One thing that's important to remember is when it comes to lighting and hard and soft light, it has nothing to do with the intensity of the light. Soft lights can be very, very harsh. That does not mean that it's a hard light. It all depends on the direction of the light. So just because a floodlight at a football stadium is very bright and very harsh, it is still a soft light. So it has to do with the direction, not the intensity of the light. So to recap, hard light creates a sharp, distinct shadow, such as a spotlight or a flashlight, one-directional beam. Soft light creates an indistinct shadow. This is a diffused, non-directional light which spreads over a wide area. Now this next slide, you don't have to write this down, but this is kind of a review from what we talked about our first couple weeks of class when we learned about how a camera works. I talked to you guys about color and how we see color of light. And the way we see colors depends on the temperature of light in degrees Kelvin. And we learned in that first unit that we did that 3200 degrees Kelvin equals white light. So let's take a look at some other colors. And again, you don't have to write this down. I just think this is interesting, so I wanted to talk to you about it while we're on the topic of lights. When we look at the Kelvin color temperature scale, we can see here 3200 Kelvin is white light. Red light is 2000 degrees Kelvin. 2500 is yellow, and it goes all the way up to 10,000, which is black. Again, we have another slide here with a quick review for you of a vocabulary word you should already know, and that is white balance. White balance, as we have previously learned, is a function of cameras that forces the camera to see an object as white, no matter what type of light is hitting this object. This is important because we don't want our videos to have a bluish or an orangish tint as we record our video. We want them to be white. We want all of our colors to be appropriate and look the way they do to our eyes. So sometimes our cameras do not adjust like our eyes do to the different types of light. So the camera can see color in a weird way. White balance allows us to tell the camera what white looks like. That way, the camera can adjust all the other colors and we can have a picture that looks true to its colors. So again, white balance is the function of video cameras that forces the camera to see an object as white, no matter what type of light is hitting that object. There are a couple different types of lighting accessories that we're going to learn about, and you're going to have a chance to complete a word wall activity as part of this assignment. The first type of accessories to lights that we're going to talk about are lights that block and shape light. So these devices are used to direct light or block out light entirely or even change the shape of light. So again, we're talking about lots of different lighting accessories as we get into some of the vocabulary here. And I want you to understand which of the two categories the lighting accessories fall into. So the first category are those lighting accessories that block or shape light. So this could be an accessory that completely darkens a light and makes it disappear, or that makes the light turn into a different shape, like a circle or a star. Or it could be one that just directs light in different locations or blocks it out of certain areas. The second type of lighting accessories, that we will talk about are diffusion devices. So diffusion devices are used to filter light, dim light, or change the color of light. So instead of blocking it or changing it completely, now we're talking about just diffusing that light. So when I say filter the light or dim the light, I'm talking about changing the intensity of the light. So making it less harsh or more harsh depending on how we are diffusing that light. And it can even be a way for us to change the color of light. So we'll learn about some accessories that help us turn our lights blue or green or red. And we have access to some of these in our class that you'll be able to use if you would like to change the color of light for any of your video projects. One important thing to keep in mind is anytime your light is too harsh or if it's not bright enough, you can always physically move the light further away or closer to the subject. Sometimes we get so hung up on using cool accessories or devices that we forget that one of the easiest ways to add more light to our subject is just move the light closer to our subject or move our subject closer to the light. The same thing, if your light's too bright, just pull that light back a little bit and it will help diffuse that light over a wider area, making it less harsh on your subject. And the last thing I want to talk to you guys about before we hop into some of our lighting vocabulary is contrast. Contrast is the difference in brightness between the lightest and darkest areas of a shot. So contrast is the difference in brightness between the brightest and the brightest and lightest and darkest areas of the shot. So when we think about contrast, a lot of us have played a little bit with contrast. If you edit your photos on Instagram, you might adjust the contrast of your photos. It's changing the difference between the darkest area of the shot and the brightest area of the shot. So you can increase the contrast, making the darkest and brightest more different than each other, or you can decrease the contrast, making them more similar. Okay, what I'd like to do at this time is we are going to complete a lighting word wall assignment. You're all familiar with our word wall assignments as we have done them in class before. Each of you will be assigned a word. For this vocabulary word, you're going to spend time in class today researching it in our textbook and then coming up with a one-page poster explaining it and teaching it to the class. So your one-page display should include the word, an easy-to-understand definition, and some type of visual that you create or you print out to put on your paper. It is very important that you do not copy the definition directly from the textbook. Some of these words are a little difficult to understand. As we get started talking about lights, we're talking about some of these have to do with math, some of them have to do with science. So it can be a little difficult here, but I want you to take your time and truly understand your vocabulary word before you just jot down a definition on your paper. Remember, it is your responsibility to teach your vocabulary word to the rest of the class so that they understand it for our test that we will have over lighting. So at this time, Ms. Masters is going to assign everyone their word wall vocabulary word. Our production assistants will pass out the textbooks and you will get started on working on creating your one-page word wall. Again, it should include your word, the definition that you came up with, and at least one visual element. We will be presenting these to the class, so make sure you understand and you're prepared for that presentation. Okay, class, now that we understand more of our lighting vocabulary and you have completed your assignments for your word wall, we're going to talk about two different styles of lighting that we will use in this class for our video projects. The first style of lighting I want to talk to you guys about is silhouette lighting. Silhouette lighting is when the subject's identity and features are hidden as a result of a background that has light, but the absence of light in front of the subject. So, for example, if you have ever seen on TV, if the news does an anonymous interview and the subject just looks like a shadow, you can't see their face, they're trying to hide their identity, that's an example of silhouette lighting and how we will be using silhouette lighting in this class. So the subject's identity and features are hidden as a result of the background being lit and the absence of a light in front. So the subject just appears dark. You will light up the wall behind the subject and keep the subject in the dark. And we're going to watch another instructional video that will explain and demonstrate how you set up this style of lighting. So it will show you step by step exactly what to do. So again, silhouette lighting is when the subject's identity is hidden because the background has light, but there is no light on the subject themselves. The next style of lighting I want to talk to you guys about is three-point lighting. And three-point lighting is the most common professionally used lighting technique that there is. This is the style of lighting that is used for all kinds of TV shows, movies, news, anything that you see on TV. Normally, they are using three-point lighting. Three-point lighting is the most flattering style of lighting, so it will make your subject look the best on camera. Three-point lighting is called three-point lighting because it involves three lights. So let's talk about those three lights and what they each do. The first light in three-point lighting is called the key light. The key light is the main source of illumination, the main source of light. Its job is to highlight the object. So your brightest light is going to be your key light. And you position the key light in front of your subject, but off-centered to one side. So, for example, if you want to use the right side of their face because that's their best side, you would have the key light in front of them and a little bit to the right so that it shines and hits their cheekbones on that right side. That's going to light up their face at an angle. We don't ever shine lights directly into our subject's eyes or straight on front. That's going to create weird shadows that won't flatter our subject. So the key light goes in front of the subject to one side, either the right or the left side, and it hits them at an angle. The second type of light, in three-point lighting is the fill light. The fill light's job is to fill in the shadows that the key light creates. So if we just shine a key light on somebody's face, a really bright light coming in at an angle, it's going to create some dark shadows on the opposite side of that person's face. So instead of just having those shadows, we put the fill light on the other side. So for example, if we put our key light on the right side of our subject's face, we would put the fill light on the left side of our subject's face. And the fill light is not as bright as the key light, but it will fill in some of those shadows, making sure that they're faint and not sharp, distinct shadows. And in just a second, I'm going to show you a visual of this, which will help it make more sense. So we have the key light, which is our brightest light. We have the fill light, which goes opposite of the key light to fill in those shadows. And then our last light in three-point lighting is the backlight. The backlight is positioned above and behind the subject. It should hit the crown of their head. So the top back portion of their head where their hair is. The purpose of the backlight is to separate the subject from the background. We don't want our subject to fade away into the background. That's going to ruin our depth of field in our shot. We want to give our video depth anytime we're putting someone on camera. So we do this by adding the backlight to separate them from the background. Here's a quick picture of what a three-point lighting setup might look like. We see that this man is setting up with three lights. He's got the stool right in the middle for his subject to sit on. We have a key light coming in, a fill light on the opposite side, and then that backlight above and behind. I think this is the best visual representation for you to understand three-point lighting. Here I'm showing you what each light brings to the table. So take a look at the left side of your screen. This is when the subject only has a key light, our brightest light. When you turn the key light on, we are lighting up this one side of the subject's face here, but it's creating very dark shadows on the other side. So when we add our fill light, you can see there are still shadows, but there are much less shadows on the other side of his face now. We can see his features, but those shadows still give us some depth to the shot. And then finally, we add the backlight, which separates our subject from the background. Take a look at his jacket. In the middle picture, his jacket is kind of fading into the background, and it's hard for us to distinguish how far away he is from what we're seeing behind him. But once we add that backlight, both his hat and his jacket now have some depth to them. So that backlight can make a big difference in your shot, even though it's a subtle difference. Okay, so let's talk about 3-point lighting on June the wiener dog here. We have 3 lights. The first light we have is our brightest light, and that is our key light. Opposite of our key light, we would have our fill light. The fill light is not as bright as the key light, but it's going to fill in some of those shadows created. And finally, we have the backlight. Now, one thing I want you to notice is our subject goes in the middle right here. We would also add our camera between the fill light and the key light. Our camera shoots in between the key light and the fill light facing our subject.